Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bright Lights. Comes to you live every Wednesday from our studios here in North Minneapolis. And as usual, another great, blessed day in the hood. We're glad to come to you today. We got a special guest today. Well, all our guests are special, but I have a guest today who's spent a lot of time and achieved a lot of things in the music industry, and just the people that he's worked with, the things that he's done, the various things that he's done. I think it's going to be very interesting to our audience. And as our audience know that that's what we focus on is achievement and achievers. And these achievers are bright lights. And one of our basic premises, instead of cursing the darkness, we're going to light a candle. And all of our guests, these candles that we're lighting, we believe that you can be anything you want to be if you're willing to uh, do what it takes to do it, and willing to be disciplined and sacrifice and things like that. So if you're coming to hear a lot of complaining about how unfair life is and what happened to us and how people treat us, this is not the place to come. But if you got a purpose or goals in life and you want to know how to achieve them, this is the place to be. Bright Lights every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. Now, before we get started, remember to go out to my website, lacyjohnson.com. Uh, Subscribe, click the notification button so you can get new contents every time we drop it. Go to our online store, donate to the podcast, and just support us if you like what we're doing. Of course, I'm a capitalist and a free enterprise person. If you don't like what we're doing, we don't expect for you to support us. Uh, so keep that in mind as you go out and take a look at lacyjohnson.com. Now, I normally start off the podcast with some things that's happened during the week, but let's go back to last week where I mentioned something I hadn't seen for a while in my life, a first, and that was when God was spelled in lowercase. And I mentioned the fact that since we've evolved, I consider evolved, to believe in monotheism, which is one God. I had never seen reference to a one God, monotheistic God spelled in lowercase. So that just kind of caught my attention, and I think it's a sign of where we're going as a country. So, once again, this week I'm going to start off with the first, and we'll go from there. And I like to connect things and then get our guest on here. Another first this week for me is I actually sat through a whole commercial on YouTube, and I don't like commercials. As you know, I can't wait till the skip ads opportunity to come. Every once in a while, a company will run a series of commercials that I kind of like and enjoy, but for the most part, I don't have time for them. Uh, this is Sports Center. That commercials that they would run, that series of commercials, I love those. Uh, some of the Geico insurance company got some I like, but for the most part, I stay away from commercials. Now, let me hurry up through this. The reason this commercial caught my attention, first of all, it looked different. It was kind of witty. And then they got into talking about the cancel culture, the woke community, and basically what is happening. This guy, Jeremy, it's called Jeremy's Razors, I think. And I'm sitting listening to this stuff, and it just gets kind of interesting the way he's putting it on, and it's witty. And bottom line, what it boils down to, this young man, I guess, I think he's in England, started his own razor company because Harry Razors, his competition, basically canceled somebody for expressing an opinion they didn't like. And it was kind of like the whole Will Smith, Jada Pinkett, Chris Rock thing, where when you saw why they were canceling the guy, it was just the comment that he made I thought wasn't worth the canceling. And this is the most important part, though. So what they're saying is, given the current state of things, that it's perhaps time for us to go into two different economies, and we'll have one economy uh, kind of like left liberal economy and one economy kind of conservative, right economy, and they are each have because what's happening now is that if you say the wrong thing, they want to fire you, they want to run you out of business, and I think that's totally it's un-American to me. America, we're supposed to be bigger and better than that, and so right now they're talking about coming up with two different economies, and if they do, I want you to know that I want to be in the economy that's free enterprise capitalism. I don't want to be in a social economy of socialism. I want to be in an economy of individual control and freedom. I don't want to be in an economy associated with government control and mandates. I want to be associated with an economy where people have to actually work for what they get. There are no entitlement. And I want to be part of an economy where people can actually express their opinions and things and not have their livelihood threatened or canceled because of an opinion. And I've said before, my attitude towards these things. Look, I just believe in free speech. I don't believe in censorship. I believe that people should be able to say whatever they want without being canceled, as long as they're not breaking the law. I don't think we have a right not to be offended. I think sometimes we need to be offended, and it's nothing wrong with that. And so I just have a very serious concerns about, especially our big tech and social media, just canceling people because they say something unpopular or even insensitive. I don't think you should be canceled for that. And so, along those lines, another thing in the news today, Elon Musk, the I consider him brilliant, techie guy, entrepreneur. He just bought, I think, a 9% stake in Twitter. And Elon Musk, I share a lot of his opinion. He shares a lot of my opinions about the current cancel culture and where we're censoring people. And so I think he's planning on making some impact in Twitter, canceling people and hiding information and censoring people. And hopefully this will catch fire on the rest of the big tech because they all do it. Not only Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. If they don't like what you're saying, they just censor you and shut you down. And I think the strength of America is freedom of speech. And I think the whole freedom of speech uh, is not for popular ideas and popular speech. If it was about popular ideas and popular speech, we would need a constitution protection dealing with freedom of speech. And so that's where I am on that. I hope he's very successful in what he's doing, and hopefully we can appreciate this country for what it is, and we can start coming together and stop canceling people and censoring people because we disagree with them. Stop being like Senator Joseph McCarthy was back in the 50s, where if he didn't like you or he thought you were a threat, people actually lost their jobs and you never heard from him again. Now, he was what they consider a right winger. The ironic part right now is the left wingers and the woke people that's doing that and canceling people. So, I will end it with this because our current situation, and I've said I'm a fan of world wars and all the wars America been in. Just study them in the Civil War. But I just remember in the Civil War documentary, Abraham Lincoln said something, and I'm going to quote it. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna make sure I get this quote right because this is what it reminds me. And he was talking about America and the division we had during the Civil War, and he basically said that's the only way we're going to be defeated. That we become we're house divided. And this is his quote. I just love it. Uh, From whence shall we expect to approach a danger? Shall some transatlantic military giant step the earth and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe and Asia could not by force take a drink from the Ohio River or make a track on the Blue Ridge in the trial of 1,000 years. No, and this is the important part, if destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we will live forever or die by suicide. And that's the way of stating another biblical proverb that says, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every house or city divided against itself will not stand. And I ask that all Americans remember that when we are making these self-righteous judgments against other people because of what they say or their beliefs. So anyway, that's enough of that. Uh, let's start cherishing free speech from the people that we do not agree with, as well as the people we do agree with. And the easiest thing in the world, one of the easiest things in the world, I think, to be, is to say your principle until it costs you, until there's a price to pay, or until that principle that you cherish must be applied to someone you don't like. And that's a lot of what I see of coming from so-called principled people nowadays. And as a country, we can and we will do better. Now, look like we're having some technical issues here. I love live broadcasts. Okay. We have our guest here. We have a connection issue with our guest Lasalle Gabriel. So they're telling me to keep improvising here. So Easter's coming up. We talked about that. I've had my mission was to go to the local meat market and buy some stuff for Easter, and I've done that. And I'm just looking forward to celebrating that. Those of you who are subscribers to the Lacy Johnson podcast, you will get a newsletter this week that tells you of some of my memories of Easter and how it has an impact on my life, how just being a follower of the teachers of Jesus has I haven't had a bad day in my life, and people find that hard to believe. I don't do fear, I don't do intimidation, I don't do stress, I don't do worry, and that's what it has done for me. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. Sometimes when people have problems with the religion, I say, well, rather than think of it as a religion, why don't we think of it as a philosophy and just really read what's being said there? Okay, I see we have my man here. I'm looking at my studio engineer. He's giving me the thumbs up. So I'm going to give you, my audience, the thumbs up. Give our guest the thumbs up and bring him on. Lasalle Gabriel. Uh, well, he's just a music man. That's what I got him down in my contact list as the music man. Uh, Welcome to Bright Lights, LaSalle.
How you doing, Lacy?
I'm doing great. All right. Well, good to see you again. A lot of we met. Actually, we met at a banquet, and we just started a conversation. You sit next to people, and he's sitting there. And actually, I thought he was kind of a quiet, shy kind of guy until we started talking about music. And then it's almost like he did a Michael Jackson personality change. And once he got on the stage, so we've had some conversation. I've been out to his studio and witnessed some of the things. So we're gonna get into that a little later, and all the people that he's worked with, all the great things he's done. I told him I was just only a first trombone in the high school band, and being in the band, I know people who are have the gift from God versus those of us like me who just had to work our butts off to keep up with them. So this guy seemed like he has the gift. So let's start at the very basic. LaSalle, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born at, about growing up, your work ethics, childhood memories, and things like that. Tell us where Lasalle Gabriel is from, and a little bit about his experience growing up.
I am from Detroit, Michigan, the Motor City, from a family of five. My father was a real estate developer and also a classically trained trumpet player. My mother was a gospel singer. And then I have two brothers, one of which was Michael Jackson's bass player for the last 10 years of his life and also appears in the film This Is It. and my other brother is a minister. And came to Minnesota early 90s, started doing session work for Jam and Lewis and Prince. And then things just took off from there.
So when you came to Minnesota, um, was it because someone knew who you were and they reached out to you and made a job offer? You were just saying that's fertile ground for me. I got to go there. How did that take place?
I was on tour with another artist in Coralville, Iowa. And we were at a gas station and I saw one of those City Page magazines. I picked it up and looked inside, and there was an audition being held for a new guitar player for a group that Prince had produced called Maserati. So I came here for the audition, and the group, I won the audition, but the group fell apart. But I was here for about 10 days, and between Jam and Lewis and Prince and all the other, heavy hitters in the music community in the Twin Cities, I made about $15,000 in the first 10 days. And John Bream did a big story on me in Star Tribune, which was great. So I said, wow, you know what? This was easy money with no work. I just kind of showed up. So, when things happen there, I figure you have favors. So I stayed here for a while.
Now, you mentioned your father was a classical trumpeter, right?
Yes.
And I'm assuming that's where you got some of your musical IQ from. Did you go to some of his concerts? Did you just listen to him around the house? What got you personally interested in music?
Well, he practiced 90 minutes a day, 7 days a week. And then on Sundays, I heard him play in the church choir. And then we attended the Church of God in Christ. And so we went to church all day. You have 3 services in the morning and 1 in the evening. So he played trumpet in all 4. And then, he bought me a trumpet, and I started taking trumpet lessons in the 3rd grade. But as time progressed, I switched to the guitar, but I maintained my profile with the trumpet all through the end of high school.
It's not easy switching from instrument to instrument unless you are gifted. So tell me, so you come here, you're playing for guitar, lead guitar, by the way, for all these well-known artists. Tell me about, you brought your family with you, I'm assuming.
No, I didn't have a family yet.
Aha, good. So you actually met your wife here in the Twin Cities, or while you were here? Okay.
I did.
Well, you mind sharing us how you met your wife, Lasalle?
I was in a recording session in Minnetonka, and I was waiting for the previous session to finish. And she was singing background vocals there. And I said, wow, who is that girl? He said, oh, that's Deanna Cool from KMLJ. She's the DJ there. And I said, I need to meet her. So I introduced myself. And then sometime prior to that, though, I had met her at the Black Music Awards at the Northrop Auditorium. She was doing celebrity interviews on the red carpet. And I went up to Pete Rhodes, and I said, who is that? And he told me the same thing. I said, well, I need to meet her. So I just kept running into her everywhere.
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned a lot of names here that are familiar to all of us. Pete Rose, Shed G. And I'm trying to remember the DJ that you're talking about. But as we fast forward, I was out at your studio earlier this week just to see how things go. And I told you I noticed that 2 of your children were there and actively participating. So well, first of all, how long have you been married, LaSalle?
23 years, 4 children.
Okay.
And they're all musically gifted.
Yeah, and that's great. And by the way, your brother is in that in the Michael Jackson documentary, you said, right?
Yeah, his name is Alex Al. He's one of the top bass players in the industry right now. He's worked with everybody from Herbie Hancock to Michael Jackson.
So so looking over your achievement in the music industry, seems like you've done quite a few things, all genres of music. So let's pick that apart a little bit. And I confess to you, and I confess to my audience, I've been blessed to be able to pick up just about anything I want to do in life. I really have. But the two things that I've struggled with that comes to mind, one is golf, and the other one is playing the guitar. And my youngest son, at when he reached teenage years, I think it was, he asked me to buy him a couple of turntables. And me being kind of like a musician kind of thing, I'm like, instead of buying him turntables, I'm going to buy him this electric guitar. And I regret that, by the way. I regret not buying him those turntables. Of course, he did not take up the electric guitar. And I decided I was going to try this. Hey, I know a little bit about music. I bombed at it. And I don't see myself ever getting good at either the electric guitar or golf. And not that I don't believe I can. It's just that at this stage in life, your values kind of change, and you got other priorities. So, how difficult or easy was it for you to just play the guitar and pick it up and start playing it? At least a treble guitar, I call it.
Well, I started out playing the bass.
Oh, okay.
At around age 10, age 11. Then when I started going out on auditions for, bands playing in nightclubs, and I would get those jobs. But I noticed that the guitar player and the lead singer got all the girls. So I said, this bass thing is over. So I got myself a guitar, had a paper out, bought a really nice guitar, and I started practicing. And my mother used to have me listen to the black radio stations where I could hear all the hit records. And she really ushered me through the ability to play rhythm guitar in any genre, because she'd have the radio station on and then she would just switch to another radio station. And the thing was, I had to have the song down pat by the time it was over. So with a lot of the Motown songs, those rhythm section guitar parts were very challenging, because those were jazz guitarists playing funk and playing R&B. They were very accomplished, artists, the Funk Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just something that I continued to do, play mostly by ear, but then I had a lot of theory that I was learning on the trumpet from 3rd grade to 12th grade. So I had those two merged together, and that helped me to develop my ear and all the things I needed to do to be able to, go on a gig. Because you know what? I've never played any session with a lead sheet. They'll bring a lead sheet out. Right. And I'll say, well, can I try the song out first? See if I can come up with something that you like. And if I don't come up with something you like, then I'll play your music sheet here. But I've never had someone prefer what they wrote for me to play when I arrived.
Well, you mentioned all kinds of things that impressed me about a musician and that I struggle to quite understand. One is just playing by ear. I mean, I'm just amazed at guys who can just play by ear. And
well, that's secondly, a gift. That's a gift.
Yeah, it gotta be. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but they do it. And then the second part, and I mentioned this to you, I always need the sheet music. It's very. I don't think I could ever play a whole song without having the sheet music in front of me. But
there's an advantage to that for horns, though. With horns, you want sheet music, because there's too many guys for them to just wing it.
Right. So okay, gotcha.
With horns, with singers, and maybe the piano player, you should definitely have charts. So otherwise, you're going to have, chaos.
Right.
The guitar player, the bass player, they can you hired them for what they do on other records. So when I played on Sounds of Blackness, first album, Africa to America, which won a Grammy back in '91. Then Low Key hired me because of my work on that album to play on I Got a Thing for You from their album, which was the #1 song. And then DJ-Quik hired me because of, the work I did with, the previous track. So it kind of snowballs. You can find yourself in a situation where in a 45-day period, you can play on 6 hit records, all because of your previous success.
Right. But what amazes me when I watch concerts, no one in the band seems to have sheet music. And what I'm saying, and you can appreciate this, and I know if they bring in orchestras and things, they got strings. Most of the time they have sheet music. but you can appreciate some of those songs arrangements are very, very intricate. And I'm like, they're remembering all this stuff, but maybe you can
Yes, because
give
the
me insight.
rehearsals for
Hmm.
anything for like the Grammys or the American Music Awards or the Oscars, all of those um, presentations have charts, but then they've been rehearsed within the inch of their lives prior to that. So you know the song by ear, but you have the chart there just in case.
Just in case. Okay, and we'll explore that some more. Let's get on into some of the great things that you've done here. Now, somewhere I read where you had 70 consecutive weeks in the top 40 of 5 Billboard charts. Explain that to our audience. And I know what that means, but maybe explain that to our audience for those who don't follow the music industry and charts and things that much.
Well, from 2005 to 2007, I appeared to have the Midas touch. I had just purchased Flight Time from Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis for 2.7 million. And then I signed a distribution deal with Warner Brothers. Then I signed Sounds of Blackness, all in about an 18-week period. Then I released the Sounds of Blackness first record. It was top 10 first week.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a country and western record that I had performed and wrote on for Dean Justin. That crossed over pop at number 28, went to number 4 country. Then there was a rock project I did for a group called the J Project. That was top 20. So basically, over the course of 16 weeks, I had produced and written 5 different songs, all of which made the top 40 in their respective genres.
And
then that lasted for 77 weeks.
Wow. And also, and you talked about this, you've spanned quite a few genres, R&B, gospel. I heard country. Am I missing any other genre that you worked in?
Well, I have an unreleased project that I produced with Wynton and Brandon Marsalis and Delfeo Marsalis and with Elvin Jones. That's a straight ahead traditional jazz project that has not been released as of yet. But I would say my bread and butter has been rock, gospel, R&B, and dance. And now I want to branch out into doing more of the traditional jazz. And then I also want to end up doing some type of orchestral work, something like the James Bond type soundtracks.
Okay, that's getting into what we call the high cotton down south. But you're from Detroit and Minnesota, you might not know much about that phraseology. So you've had quite a few awards, also. Let's say, tell us about some of these awards that you've won for your achievement in music.
Well, the 2 Grammys and Stellar Award are for 3 separate projects I did with Sounds of Blackness from 91 through 2006. And I've been written up in about 300 issues of Billboard Magazine. So, I mean, my career really is in the second phase. I'm getting ready to do a lot more projects, starting a new record label, a new production company. It's working out pretty good.
So, given everything you've done, from musician to co-writing, arranging, uh, and we'll talk about the business part in a little bit. Do you have a favorite when you look back over your career? Is there one area that you enjoy more than the other?
I would say the gospel work I find the most fulfilling because those are the best singers
Right. Oh, yeah.
and the best musicians. The rock projects and the country are also challenging because the guitar work has to be stellar. But I enjoy all of it. I just like working with good musicians and good record labels and good promoters and good marketing teams, people who are dedicated to excellence, great mix artists. We do a lot of work with Mark Needham. He's one of the top 5 mix engineers in the United States. He's had 13 Grammy nominations. So I like working with people that are at the top of their game. And the genre doesn't really matter. But if someone's going to pay me $100,000 to produce an unknown act, I would want it to be gospel because someone like an Ann Nesby they just put your lights out. I mean, you enjoy the music, you feel the passion and the spiritual stimulation of what the artist is bringing forth on the track, and it's fantastic.
Well, I'm gonna throw a novice kind of curveball at you in this interview. Um, I've studied a little bit of classical music, the Mozarts and the Beethovens and the Brahms and the waltzes and things like that. This is where I'm going. When I listen to classical music and I know all the theory and stuff behind it and things like that, and then I listen to Motown, I've come to the personal opinion you can't get any better than Motown and the Folk Brothers. I mean, I
Well,
think they're yeah. Go ahead.
those gentlemen are the most talented rhythm section musicians in music history. The work that, I mean, Berry Gordy had this concept where he wanted established high end jazz players, the horn players, the drummers, the piano, the guitars. He wanted jazz musicians, guys that could play anything you could possibly imagine for them to play. They could get it for you in 20 seconds. And then beyond that, if you just let them loose with the beat, they would come up with things that you didn't even anticipate writing on your own. So those were stellar musicians. We don't see a lot of that right now. I think a lot of the work that Bruno Mars is doing has been fantastic with bringing live music back. A lot of the projects that I'm going to be working on going forward will have live rhythm sections as well.
Well, you mentioned Bruno Mars, and I was mentioning to you earlier that most of the musician artists or whatever I see on the Grammys, I've never heard of them before in my life, and that's because I guess I don't listen to radio. But you mentioned Bruno Mars. Are there any modern artists that we would recognize that name? Any other artists like that that really you look at and you say that person is pretty dang good, and I really like the
As
work that they do.
as far as recording artists are concerned, I would say, and then keep in mind that he won two of the major Grammys a couple weeks ago for his work with Anderson .Paak. Um, he is the best in the business, period. In terms of, you can tell there's no vocal steroids being used to help him complete what you hear him sing.
You mean
That's real
Bruno?
guitar.
We're talking to Bruno, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, good, good.
Many people don't realize that he plays most of the instruments. He's playing the drums, he's playing the keyboards, he brings in a bass player and a guitar player, but he's an amazing drummer. So that guy, he's the best in the business right now.
He almost sound like today's Prince. He'll do all
Well,
that great stuff.
he is in the same spiritual lineup of a Prince, but Prince is by far the greatest musician of all time.
Yeah.
In music history. So there's no one that's going to be able to sing like that, dance like that, play guitar, play bass, write the song, produce the song. I mean, it's really unmatched. We're never going to see that in our lifetime.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure I can go here with you because you probably saw the performance he did at the Music Hall of Fame with all the other guitarists. I forgot Weeping.
I did.
What was the name of that song he was playing, by the way? Weeping. I forgot exactly.
As something gently weeps.
Yeah, as just gently weeps. Yeah, but I saw that performance, and that was the first time I realized. Yeah, first time I realized how good he was. And that's what separated him from a lot of other people, other contemporaries. So you mentioned a phrase there that caught my attention. Vocal steroids, I think, is the phrase that you used. And just hearing that phrase makes me think that there's some things going on with people's voices, and maybe it's technology that's making them sound better. What? Basically, what I'm getting at, Lasalle, is what the heck is vocal steroids?
Well, it's a known fact that 90% of the artists on the Billboard charts have some kind of additives added to their voice. They can change the color of their voice. They can change pitch problems in what they're singing. I mean, what the software will do now is
Right.
really out of control. I mean, it used to be one thing. These things were designed to be a producer's sidecar additive to help an artist cross the finish line. But now they're using it live. You have artists come to town at
Oh.
US Bank Stadium and they're singing through Pro Tools, or the Pro Tools tracks are playing in the background. But at the same time, the auto tune or Melodyne is also being used to help alter what you hear in the $150 seat you paid for.
Oh, I can believe that. One great thing about the old days, and some of these artists we'll talk about in a little bit that you've actually worked with. When you went to hear Marvin Gaye live, he sounded like Marvin Gaye on the album.
Absolutely.
Aretha Franklin, a Patti LaBelle, a Ray Charles, or even James Brown. When you went to hear them live, they sounded like they did on the album. And now that you mentioned that, I'm gonna pick an artist today, and I'm gonna go look at listen to. But you say they got it built into their live performances now, also, right?
Yes, they do.
That's too bad. Well, I can't do
And
that
it's
then.
90% of the industry. So I don't have to
Yeah.
pick out any names, just but
Right,
9 out of 10 is a lot.
right. And well, let's say I gotta ask you this: do you make use of that? Would
We
you be?
absolutely
You
we
have to.
absolutely do not allow
Oh,
artists to a sing parts of a song, although repetitive in other parts of the 4 minute presentation, to skip. So I sang that 8 bar chorus once. Can't you just copy it and
oh
paste it
yeah,
somewhere
right.
else? We don't allow that to take place in our studio. We don't allow anybody to do anything, and we don't use auto tune on anything. My logic is if you need auto tune, you shouldn't be in my studio.
Right.
I mean, I'm looking for singers, not people who can sound like singers. Now we've had people come in, they'll say, "Yeah, Mr. Gabriel, I got this song, I want you to finish it for me," and I'll listen to it. Say, "Well, it's not bad. Can I hear you sing it?" And they can't sing their own songs that they wrote. They can
Wow.
sing maybe the first 90 seconds, but that's about it.
Well, I can say the young lady that you had singing on Saturday, I could tell it was her own voice, and she didn't need any help with that. So I can see
Well,
that. Uh-huh.
Alex is a wonder kind. Yeah, she's from Minnesota, but we discovered her while she was attending prestigious music university in Nashville, and she's just a phenomenal singer. She can sing anything. She's a great songwriter, and we think the group that she and I have worked hard to put together over the last 6 months is going to have a great impact on the industry because all the music is live musicians and all the singing is live singing.
Wow. And so we've been stepping through all the things that you've achieved in this industry. And heads up, I'm gonna want some inside stories here
Sure.
sometime before this interview because you work with such great people. But before we go there, let's touch on a couple of other areas that you have experience in and that you've achieved in. I saw somewhere where you had done some film work. Uh, what are some of the films that you've worked on, Lasalle?
I've worked as a post production supervisor for Paramount Domestic Television, Stars Cable Network, and also Showtime. 4 different projects, actually 5 now. I just finished another one. And then I've done songwriting for Days of Our Lives soap opera back in the early stages of my career in the early 90s. I was a ghostwriter for them. Some of these, for lack of a better term, cheesy parts of a soap opera where a guy starts singing to his love interest. I used to do that kind of music.
Oh, okay.
Tremendously lucrative. But I just got to a point where I've started to overproduce the songs. It was supposed to sound like, you know, Danny obviously could have sung this song in his living room, and you don't want to think about how well it's produced. But I started giving them more and more elaborate productions with horns and strings. I said, "Oh, maybe it's time for you to stop working in television and go into music." So I took that as a good suggestion.
Well, and I'll follow up on that. You mentioned earlier that you had purchased Flight Time Studios, and I remember when Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis first started talking about moving to LA, which I didn't like. I liked the fact that they were here in Minnesota and they weren't out there with the rest of the crowd and stuff like that. But I remember when they first started talking about moving to California, that's one of the consideration was they wanted to do more film work and Hollywood type work. Uh, the reason they have to be there is because of the networking, and that's your business, and the better you be there is something they couldn't have done from Minnesota. How does that whole industry work as far as getting in on some of the movies and televisions?
Well, I mean, these are the two most celebrated producers, songwriters of the last half century. So I kind of believe they could have been in Omaha, Nebraska, and still done the same body of work. I have no idea what their body of work has been in TV and film and for commercials and so on and so forth. It's just hard to know. But being in Hollywood does make it easier because you have more bites at the apple, more people to talk to. Whereas in Minnesota, you have to create your own success from scratch.
Yeah. And I'm assuming there's a lot of Hollywood parties and things. A lot of times that's how you make your connections and give me a
Absolutely.
call tomorrow. And I'm going to look up and see how well they're doing out there. I know we missed them here. I know Jimmy Jam. In fact, I live next to Jimmy Jam's dad, as a matter of fact. And I once met him a couple of times, and a great guy. I like the fact that him and Terry Lewis, they say they never, all their, they had handshake agreements on everything, and they're still friends, and that doesn't last long, I'm assuming, in this business. So let's transition a little bit, talking about business, to Lasalle Gabriel, the music businessman, entrepreneur. Now, I read somewhere where you had your own label, or you still have your own label, back in, I think it was 2009, I think, but I don't remember things as much as I used to when in my younger days. But you had your own label a few years ago. Am I not correct in that?
Well, I started out in 2001, with a strategic partnership with IBM for $7 million, which was the first of its type for an African American in their 100-year history. Then I parlayed that into buying a studio. And I started out trying to buy Paisley Park. Prince was selling the building, wanted $15 million. We came in, we offered him 3.7. He came down to 12. We came up to 5. He came up to 10. We came up to 7. But then for about 4 months, we just couldn't close the deal. Then when the opportunity came to buy Flight Time, we jumped on it. We paid Jam and Lewis $2.7 million, and then sold the building to another investment group for $7 million the same day.
That's not a bad uh, profit or ROI within
Not at all.
24
So then we
hours.
used that money to start the record label, and then we had a lot of hit records. That company, I would say, from 2003 to 2007, grossed over $13 million with a pre-tax profit margin of about 60%. So it's
Sound
very
like you.
lucrative. So
Mhm.
so I try to keep my foot on the music side and the business side. The family business for me, going all the way back to 1906 in Texas. My grandfather, my father, my great grandfather were all in the real estate development. So I used to go to, my father used to take me to work with him on Saturdays. I'd get dressed up in my suit. I think I was about 10 or 11. And he would take me all day to all of his meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I kind of feel that that's where I learned the real estate business through him by just sitting at his shoulder, listening to his negotiations and processes that he had to go through to complete a deal. Now, I wasn't good at that in the 80s. I found it boring. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, I found it useful that I have that knowledge, and that allowed me to maximize opportunities to create more return on investment for my investors.
Well, you mentioned one area. Well, I'm curious about everything, but one area of the music industry that I've always been curious about is the whole area of distribution. And you said you had a distribution deal. You know, a novice on the outside looking in, we would think that if you make good music, just about anybody can distribute it for you. But once again, I'm quite sure it doesn't work that way. And we look at movie distribution, but the whole field of distribution is it. You have to be around for a while. You have to have a network. You can't get in
For
the
me,
door. Uh
I'll tell you, for me, it was the song I produced called Carry the Flag,
huh.
which was a country song by an artist by the name of Dean Justin from Nashville.
Hmm.
Song came in at number 8 the first week, went in the top 5 for 3 months. And that's when I, found myself on Warner Brothers, technically WIA, distribution network. They wanted to see if I had any more hit records. And then that's when I signed Sounds of Blackness. But the difference is if you have your own record label, you've got to pay the freight, the merchandising, the marketing, and the promotion. But you're talking about making 80 cents on the dollar versus 12 cents on the dollar as an artist. So if you're right and you pick the right people and you got the right song, there's a huge upside of profit that can be made.
On the if you distribute it yourself or if you're
Absolutely.
right. Okay, gotcha.
If you can do a deal with Universal Music Group or Warner Brothers, which is WIA, or Sony, which is Orchard, or any of those, really high-end distribution networks that have huge market share throughout the international landscape.
So we keeping along that theme. We talked earlier about Sam Cooke, and he is uh, underappreciated, underknown, if that's such a word in Scrabble. Artist, record exec, entrepreneur. Where I'm getting to, in fact, I tell everybody he was Barry Gordy before there was a Barry Gordy. I know Barry,
Absolutely.
yeah, Barry go down in history, but they don't know how great this guy was. But where I'm getting at is, and we know there have been a documentary on his death that really raised some questions and suspicious about it, and people think it has something to do with where he was trying to go in music. But where I want to go with that is that we do have a lot of artists, some artists coming along nowadays who are basically bucking the system and doing their own thing. And I'm assuming it involved distribution. I'm thinking of artists like Master P, even Death Row and Suge Knight and those guys and P Diddy, and they basically seem like to me, at least on the outside looking in, not being inside in the music industry, seemed to me like they bucked the system and didn't go the standard route. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, not to oversimplify it,
Hmm.
it's fair to say they were drug dealers. Okay, Master P was a drug dealer. All those guys were in the drug trade, and then they went legit. But then they had lots of cash to work with. Now,
Hmm.
that's the money side. The artistic side is that they were also musical geniuses. I mean, when you look at the work that Master P did, it was amazing. He had an incredible long run, made hundreds of millions of dollars. And then the same thing with Jay Z and Puff Daddies. You know, my business model, I have to raise money with investors and talk to banks and investment bankers. You know, it's been harder, but I still
Right,
managed to make $22 million over a period of time. Um, but have to pay that money back.
right.
If you're on the other side of the coin, and you don't have to pay it back, you go legit. I mean, it works. It keeps working. I mean, more stories can be told about how companies were financed using how we say special funding sources
Hmm.
than we have time to go through. I mean, there's a lot of that takes place, but those are just the guys that admit it.
Right. Well, I'm hesitant to say because I do have some other people who are pretty close to the hip hop music industry, so I don't want to say too much, but I will just say that a lot of those guys do have a lot of cash, and they are driving around in their Bentleys and Rolls Royce, and they do have record labels. And I'll just leave it at that
Well, I
for
mean,
now.
a lot of guys are just super talented.
Right.
I mean, you take a guy like Jermaine Dupri. Now, his father, his uncle, was a record executive, and you look at the work Jam and Lewis have done. I mean, they're just freaking talented guys. I mean,
Yes.
Babyface, they're just genius musicians. Prince was just a genius musician. So your artistic prowess can carve a pathway for you to succeed in. Those people who have to be more creative with their funding sources don't have access to those lines of cash. So there's no wrong way to do it if you know what you're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
Jam and Lewis, Prince, L.A. Reid, Babyface, Pharrell Williams, they're just super talented. Dr. Luke is super talented. Dr. Dre, super talented.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're a great songwriter, like the guys I just mentioned, your writing craft, your production acumen is going to make space for you in the industry, period. You'll
So,
attract the money you need to go forward.
so yeah, and you're in an industry uh, where, let's say, where it's not known to be, for me at least, and you can correct me. Shall I say family friendly? That
It can be.
it
It
can
can
be.
be.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of. Uh, uh, well, I don't want to use Jay-Z and Beyonce. I'm trying to think of a musical family. Barry Gordy, I guess. Family was pretty good family background, but you're saying it can be, so it's not all uh, rock and roll, women and drugs and things like that in the
I know
industry.
that the industry has that reputation, but that's a very, very small subset of our industry.
Right, right.
Most, and I mean like 85, 89%, it's just based on talent and hard work.
Hmm.
Those guys that get in, through other means, they got to do what they got to do. But now, if you take that or you put that aside and just say, well, what kind of music did Master P put out? He was a genius. Then he parlayed that into other projects and strategic partnerships and distribution deals. He's just a genius. He was always a genius.
Yeah.
So, I often would tell young kids, fifth grade to say 10th grade, if you're looking at a guy who's working in street trade situations, he's got to manage his inventory. He's got to be good at marketing. He's got to have quality control. He's got to have a good sales staff. He's got to watch out for the police. These guys have the brain matter to do
Hmm.
big business deals. But
Yes, yes, yes. Uh-huh.
due to where they are in the landscape of life, I mean, no one gets to pick their address when they're born.
Right.
You're gonna live where you live. So a lot of these guys they have this natural business acumen. They're just born with it. So when they get an opportunity to do something, um, you know, on the straight and narrow, they hit the ball out of the park.
So yeah, and let's talk a little bit about how to, and we're gonna get to some inside story and get you off here so you can go have some supper and with your family. But how has the technology, let's say the internet, uh, what's the main impact has it had on the music business? And I'm saying that from the sense that it seems like you can bypass a lot of middlemen
That's what has happened.
on the internet, and seem like you can. And I hear a lot about these mixtapes and things like that. You can raise funds and everything. So, how has it changed the industry? And I guess what percentage of the industry has changed? Because I know there's still the old. Well, there's probably even some for albums out there, and the old distribution companies, old music companies. How has the internet basically changed the music industry?
Well, in the '80s, early '90s, there were 50,000 songs released every week. Now, because of do-it-yourself protocols, you're looking at 60,000 records being released per day. Per day. Because, a guy in London and a guy in Omaha, Nebraska, and a guy in New York, they all have access to the same portals to distribute their music through iTunes and, Spotify. So it's a crowded field. It's easier to get in the business now, but it's now harder to have a hit record because the competition is intense. And the pathways to getting a song played on the radio now has been replaced with, can you get an influencer on TikTok to promote your song? And these things, now that's low hanging fruit. I can say, you could reach somebody who's got 40 million followers and send your song to them. They're going to listen to it. Now I didn't have that access 30 years ago. I had to go to New York and do all of these other things, trying to meet some of these heavy hitters to get them to listen to my music. Now you can basically get a song to anyone within 3 days.
Right. So am I to assume the way it works is that I get a song to one of these influencers with 40 million followers? I'm making some of this stuff up. I'm not a social media kind of guy. If they like it, their
And you got to
followers.
pay them.
You got to pay them. Yep. Yeah.
And they're not cheap. We're talking 5 figures here.
Oh,
you're talking 20, 40, 60, 250,000. You look, some of the heavy hitter influencers, their clientele is Amazon, it's NBC, it's General Motors, it's Wonder Bread, it's Taco Bell. So well, you know what? I like your song and I like to promote your song, and I'll promote your song for $40,000.
Yeah.
But now she's got 40 million followers.
Right.
There can't be an easier way to get to 40 million people than 40 grand.
Yeah, I'm going kicking and screaming to the social media world, but I see it from an economic standpoint. But the way you describe that situation, one of the questions that comes to my mind for someone like you who are in the business, if there's 60,000 songs being released every day, how in the heck do you keep track of it? And I mean, because I'm assuming that one of the things that you do is identify talent. And
yes,
is there so much talent out there that it's hard to just sift through them all? What's your process of, out of these 60,000 songs being released a day, there's some talented artists out there that I would like to have on my label. How do you go about even approaching such a, sounds like a monumental task?
I've been in the business a long time. And people go to my website, lasallegabriel.com, and they send me music. So I probably get approached by 20 people a day.
Right.
Probably 300 people a day visit my website. And like today, I probably got 25 different artists sent me music that I haven't listened to. Most of it is not going to be professionally recorded or well written. But the point is, you only need one hit to change your lifetime. So I listen to everything that people send me. I listen to it. And then, there's word of mouth. I would call you, hey, you know anybody that does this? I get on the phone, I get on Facebook, I ask all my friends, I go to Twitter and talk to my 15,000 people, whatever, and say, is anybody this, that, and the other? And you'd be surprised who will contact you.
Well, yeah, and once you start answering that, I realize you're the mountain that people come to, and you don't need to go looking for artists with your.
Well, I mean, back in the day, you would go to nightclubs,
right.
and you would go to different places where you could hear people sing and perform, but to a lesser extent, that's still available today in Minnesota. But for the most part, you're online listening to playlists off Spotify, and I'm on TikTok every day listening to people. A couple hours a day I'm on TikTok listening to what's in their top 40, what's in their top 20. And Sirius XM, I go through I drive my kids and my wife crazy with this. If you're in the car with me, be prepared to listen to 20 stations pretty much at the same time. Because I mean, I'm going through everything. I go through the country station, the gospel station, the smooth jazz, the traditional jazz, the hip hop, the rap, the old school. A lot of the house music projects and dance music. I listen to everything.
Yeah. So now let's talk a little bit about some of because you work with some of everyone. I've seen Prince, I've seen Barry White, I've seen Anita Baker. I could keep going down the line. So why don't we talk about some of the people? Give us some. We want that's the word I'm looking for. Positive kind of stuff, but interesting stories. Uh, let's talk about Anita Baker. I know you did some work with her, and she's one of my favorite singers. In fact, "No One in the World" is one of my favorite songs. It's my favorite Anita Baker song, "No One in the World," and I just love the arrangement of that song. But eh, eh, and you are going to tell me you play guitar on that song because it's got some funky guitar stuff going on
Well,
there and
I
then.
never had the opportunity to play on any of her songs, but she did hire me in the early 2000s to join her on tour. And she called and she says, "Well, I called Prince and I called George Duke and I called two other, Herbie Hancock, people who I didn't even realize knew who I was."
Hmm.
And she said, "I'm looking for this guy that's got to be the Black Clapton. I want a black guy who can play like Eric Clapton." And three of the four guys recommended me. So she called me up one night and she says, "Well, I'd like for you to have you come out on my tour." And I agreed, and I was there in 2 days. I said, "Well, what do you need me to do?" She says, "Well, the entire orchestra is going to be dressed in gowns and tuxedos. I want you to sit off to the side of stage right, and every time I leave to change clothes, you're going to play a guitar solo till I get back." It was the best gig in the world.
Yeah.
No other artist has ever treated me as well as Anita Baker. Then every night she took us out for steak dinner. And 5-star, 4-star hotels, first class travel on airplanes. It was just fantastic.
And I'm going to digress a little bit. We're going to come back about Barry White, Prince, and all those other guys. But I just thought, who is your all time? And I'm gonna say all time favorite. I'm not gonna say who's the best because I don't. I think a lot of times we get off track with that. Name me one or two of your all time favorite guitarists and who someone who had an influence on you.
I started out listening to the Motown sound guitar players. Never knew their names. As I grew as a musician in my early teens, I listened to Carlos Santana.
Oh
I
yeah.
listened to Jeff Beck. I listened to
Mm-hmm.
B.B. King. I listened to Jimi Hendrix. Now, Jimi Hendrix, I think I discovered him around 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
I found his music impossible to play. Just, I couldn't hear the voicings. I couldn't get the tone. I must have worked on Jimi Hendrix for 8 years before I could actually play a Hendrix tune to my standard of what it should sound like. And then I went all over the country doing a Jimi Hendrix tribute. And I did that for probably 5, 6 years, made a lot of money doing that. And that was kind of how I, reintroduced myself into the industry. But those guys, and then early on, the Gap Band was very influential in my career. I had a chance to work with them for about 7 years as well.
Gap band. That's some funky music too. Funky rhythm guitar. Well, let's talk about one other thing I was curious about. Guitar riffs. I think that's what they call them. Am I using the right term there? Let's say
Yeah,
riffs.
absolutely.
Uh, Now, normally when they talk about riffs, they talk about rhythm guitars, but I'm
Yes.
assuming it also applies to bass guitars. But where I'm getting to, just out of curiosity, what name me some of your favorite uh, riffs as far as the rhythm guitar is concerned.
David Williams, who plays the guitar riff on Billie Jean,
Oh yeah, okay.
is my favorite rhythm guitarist. And then also Paul Jackson Jr., who has played on an incredible number of top 10 hit records. Those are my two favorite rhythm guys. And then also Ray Parker, who was my mentor during in high school.
Oh, okay, okay. Now you mentioned your Jimi Hendrix, and we're gonna finish to go back to our inside story here. Tour. Jimmy. Jimmy would play with his teeth behind his back. I'm assuming they didn't expect for Lasalle Gabriel to be doing things like that. Or did they expect it? And if they did you accommodate them, LaSalle?
Not only did they expect it, they paid me,
Ah,
and which is
okay,
even more important.
right.
Well, no, I would play with my teeth behind my back. You know, when I auditioned for Vesta Williams,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, I kind of hijacked her band to get in. I just had to have a tour. I called my dad. I said, "Look, I've been in LA now, and I just can't get arrested." So he says, "Look, all the great gigs are taken, so you're gonna have to take one." So I started going around to all the different rehearsal halls trying to find somebody that had a guitar player who was, you know, fireable. And
Right.
so I got a chance to audition for her. And although, you know, Vesta Williams' music was mostly ballads and up-tempo R&B, but I came in
Mhm.
dressed like Jimi Hendrix. I had this pink Stratocaster. I came in dressed just like Jimi Hendrix, had makeup on, and right in the middle of one of her songs, I just went crazy, you know, knocking over the keyboard stands and the cymbal stands, played behind my teeth, played behind my back, fell on the floor like I was on fire. And I just look, they're not going to hire me anyway, but they're going to be talking about me tomorrow morning. That was my goal.
Right,
So
right.
then I look out in the audience, and Vesta was laughing. She just could not stop laughing. She says, "That's my new guitar player." And the manager went up to the previous guitar player and just fired him on the spot and said, "Hey, look,
Wow.
we need you to do that every night."
Wow. And Jimmy used to do things like break his guitar, set it on fire and everything.
I've set many a guitar on fire.
So let's talk a little bit back to your artists that you work with. And the one that I really want to know about is Barry White. I just thought he was a great arranger, producer, singer, songwriter. The things he did with his orchestra. I didn't know too many people in R&B and pop music who had their own orchestra. Tell me, son, how was your experience working with Barry White?
Well, I had just finished an 8 month long tour with Vesta Williams.
Hmm.
And so I had came home. I was in Glendale, California at the time, and I was just exhausted. Finally sleeping in my own bed for the first time in 8 months. And about 7:30 in the morning, the phone rings. When you don't call musicians at 7:30 in the morning and
Hmm.
expect them to answer.
Right.
At any rate, I answer the phone, and this guy says, "Hey, this is Barry White." And I figured one of my buddies impersonating him. So
Hmm.
I hung up. So a few minutes later, he calls back. He says, "Hi, this is Barry White." And I says, "Oh, yeah, right." And then I hung up on him again. So he calls me 3 times. I hang up on him. Then about 30 minutes later, I get a call from the vice president's assistant at A&M Records. And she goes, "Oh, how was your tour?" I was like, "Good, blah, blah, blah." "Well, we would appreciate it the next time Barry White calls that you take the call." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I have insulted one of the greatest musical producers of all time." So he
Hmm.
calls me back. He was very kind about it. He laughed. We got a good laugh out of it. And he said, "Listen, you're going to be my new guitar player. I need you to be at my house in 30 minutes." And that was it. So I said, "Well, when is the audition?" So there are no auditions. I'm picking you to be my new guitar player. So I worked as his assistant music director and did a video with him and did several sessions as well. He became my mentor in the music industry for many years up until the time of his death.
Wow. And when I hear Barry White and his orchestra, I'm thinking that there are several genius rhythm guitarists in his orchestra. Am I correct in that? And is there such thing as a first guitarist in an orchestra like
I
Barry
mean, kind of
White?
like horns.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh huh.
that was the only thing about his orchestra that I wasn't a great fan of. Sometimes there were four guitar players.
Hmm.
But when you listen to a Barry White song, those guitar parts overlap and one person cannot play them all anyway.
Right. I got you. Got you.
So I'd say that the majority of the concerts I did with Barry, there were three guitar players, and for the most part, that covered all the bases. But every once in a while, he'd have a fourth guitar player on stage. It was fantastic, and it taught me to listen in a much more intricate, precise manner of the way rhythm section parts are put together.
Okay, and this is the last inside story type of question I'm going to ask. But you basically, when you moved to Minneapolis, you moved to the Minneapolis music scene, and we tend to think of Prince, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, the Time, Morris Day, and my high school classmate and good friend Alexander O'Neal, and that Sherelle and that crowd. How did you give me your, let's say, I would say, fondest memories of the Minneapolis sound and the crew once you move here from Detroit, I think it was.
I would say working at Flight Time, for a period of about over a 7-year period, I performed on several projects that were either produced by Jam and Lewis or executive produced by Jam and Lewis. I mean, I just enjoyed everything. I liked doing the work for Prince. Prince invited me to tour with him twice. I declined those offers. And then we tried to come together on a deal for me to buy his building, and we weren't able to make it work. But that kind of set up the table for me to buy Flight Time. But the club scene, people like Jelly Bean Johnson, those guys from MPG, just all fantastic musicians. Really nice guys, very down to earth. Even to this day, they're just fantastic guys. The kind of people that no matter what genre you were working in, if they were playing with you on stage, you had a good, rapport with them.
Wow. So let's get ready to wrap things up here. First of all, I'm thinking about the young, let's say 12-year-old down in his basement right now writing music and want to one day be rich and famous in the music industry. And we know what the probabilities there are, but there are certain things you have to do regardless, even though your chances are slim. What advice would you give a talented young person out there nowadays, and they're dedicated, they're willing to put in all the work, and we do know that there's no guarantee in life or anything, and especially something like the music industry. Is there any advice you would share with people who have a dream of getting into the music industry besides have a plan B?
Well, in much the way that I have groomed and mentored my children that are in the music industry. My daughter Lauren's a great songwriter and singer. My son Grant, just a fabulous songwriter and producer. They should start out taking piano lessons. I don't care what you're going to do in the industry, if it's going to be from the stage or in the studio, you need to learn to play the piano. You don't need to be the next Herbie Hancock, but you need to know your scales and your chords. So I would tell any person that has aspirations of being in the music industry as either a songwriter, a producer, or an artist, they should take piano lessons. It's the best $100 a month you're going to be able to get. And so that will allow you to hear the difference between good music and bad music and absolute crap. A lot of stuff is just garbage. I mean, I get stuff from people all the time where I can tell the guy's tone deaf. He can't tell he's in the wrong key, and he's singing with passion, but he's in the wrong key of the song that he wrote himself. You don't want to be that guy. Now, learning to play the piano is going to make you a better songwriter, a better singer, and then help you discover ways to write music that you would not have at your disposal without that musical acumen.
Well, a couple of last questions here. First of all, have you ever written a song and upon hearing the final product, you decided it wasn't good and it ended up on the cutting floor?
Every day.
Oh, okay, good. Uh, that's good
Every
to know.
day I come in, I tell a guy, I says, "That's not a hit. Start over."
Wait a minute, I'm talking about one of your songs, not someone else's song. You've done that with one of your
Oh
songs,
no,
right?
every song I've
Uh,
ever written has been fabulous.
oh, okay, gotcha. I figured that. Uh, and then your wife, is she still singing? You met her when you met her. She was
Well,
a
my
singer.
wife does sing, but she was actually the first female black broadcaster at pop radio uh, back in the '90s. And so, yes, she can sing. Has always has all these different talents as a singer, as a assistant director out at Paisley Park, and then she worked at KMOJ. She worked at KDWB and a lot of rock stations. Let's see, what was her name back then? Uh,
She had a stage name.
Deanna Kelly. That was her.
Yeah, not
Deanna
Kelly.
Cool, Deanna Klug, Deanna Kelly, and then the only last name that matters is mine. So, but she was fabulous, and she was a trailblazer, because I mean, if you think back in the '80s, there were no black DJs on KDWB or WLOL.
Right.
She was the first.
Well, I have to interject that in spite of all your accomplishments and achievement in the music industry, and I'm like this with most things I do, most people, what I admire most is you a family man and you raised your children, etc. Became a role model for them, and they're following in your footsteps in the music industry. And I'm like that. I don't care what you did. I don't care if you're a movie star or mechanic. Those are the things I admire in people most of all. So, tell us what you're currently doing, LaSalle, and what you're planning on doing in the future.
We just built a 15,000 square foot recording studio in Maple Grove. It's a
Mhm.
$5 million building, and it has three recording studios. It's a state of the art, super analog facility. And going forward over the next 3 quarters, we're going to be investing an additional $2 million to upgrade the system for a 5,000 square foot expansion for post production for television and film. And that's at huge profit margins. Upwards of 40% of the post production facilities in California went out of business during the pandemic. And we're in this cycle now that I like to call quarantainment. There's more television and film creative content being viewed now than at any time in history. So there's not enough post production facilities in North America. So we believe that the moment we have this additional layer of services to our service model, that it will be highly lucrative.
Wow. And I'm assuming you're doing some fundraising now to help complete this studio. Is that uh, correct?
It is correct. We've had a robust history over the last 7, 8 quarters of raising money, and we turn down more money than we take in. We want the right people at the right time. We're looking for investors that can add some intrinsic value to what they bring to the table in addition to the cash. Some political alliances,
Hmm.
market share, knowledge. We want people that are smarter than we are.
That's always a good thing. So we're going to end it on a couple of things. First of all, we talked about the what you're currently doing in your future. What about the music industry? And not talk current. What do you see the music industry going, given the technology, given the culture, given everything that's going on out there now?
Well, my father used to say that a circle had 360 points on it, but that 1 and 360 were right next to one another. So I believe we've seen the apex of easy money in the music industry. You have people like Ellie Mae and her and Bruno Mars. You're starting to hear real music on the radio, and it's
It's,
becoming more
mm,
pervasive every day. And I really think that we've reached a point where someone coming in with a sample and a drum beat, that guy is it's going to be difficult for him to win Song of the Year at the Grammys,
mm, mhm.
because lift the rockets now for you to come out and do some different type of music, which is a throwback to the '70s and '80s when you
Hmm.
didn't have sampling, you didn't have all the fantastic technology that you have right now. I have guys come in my building every day that are amazing musicians from all over the country, and that's what we're looking for.
Well, a good place for us to end, and for this last question I have for you, LaSalle. Uh, do you? I'm assuming that one of these days you're going to need a trombone player out there.
Absolutely.
Well, I might try to dust my trombone off. You're a trumpet player, and you know the importance of the what is it, amateur when you're
Yes.
a brass player. I've lost that,
Yes.
and
Well, that you never know. I see people all the time. When I went to my high school reunion about 3 years ago, there was a
Mhm.
guy who played saxophone back in the school band days. And he says, "Hey, man, call me sometime for a session." About 6 weeks later, I called him up. I said, "Look, I got a song for you to play." He goes, "No, you're kidding." I said, "No, you say you're still playing, right?" He said, "Yes, I am." So yeah, I'm sending you the tracks, and we got him on the song. So be careful what you ask for,
You might get it.
because you,
I
you
am
just
gonna
never
go
know. I
out.
got your phone number.
I am gonna go out and try to play a trombone. My niece was taking trombone lessons in high school about 10, 20 years ago, and I picked it up. I could not play a note. I remember,
Horns are coming back, though. Horns
yeah.
are coming
Oh, yeah,
back. You got to
yes,
start
they
getting
are.
more and more horns.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
our band director was a trumpet player, and this is dating myself. Back then, I think it was the high C note that everybody was trying to hit. I think it was, and there was things like triple tonguing and things like that. I'm quite sure a professional like you still remember how to do some of those things and hit those high C's. I'm assuming that LaSalle.
Well, my youngest boy, Liam, just got a trumpet for
Uh-huh.
Christmas and just bought him a mouthpiece about 2 weeks ago. So he's taking lessons. But yes, I mean, there has been no other time in the last 20 years where real musicians have an opportunity to be recorded on top 40 records. The time is now.
Well, I'm gonna let you go. The music industry has always been fascinating to me. I know the competition out there. Anyone who can achieve in that industry, we know they had to pay some dues. There had to be some tenacity involved in that. So I really
Absolutely.
admire what you're doing. In fact, I'm such a music interest aficionado, I think. So interested in music. I'm gonna have you back and talk some more things and more details and things. And
Sure.
I just looking back on my early years, I love academics, I love sports, but I also had a great love for music and what can that can do for us and how it soothes the savage beast, as they say. So once again, thank you for coming on. Really admire all the achievement that you've made. I know how tough it is. I got some idea. I mean, playing first trombone in high school is not compared to anything to what you do, but I just got some idea for music theory and all the things that go into what you're doing and the talent the
Well, it's
God give us.
interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of the public schools now have removed music from the school.
Yeah.
And so we're in the early stages of starting a new music foundation, a partnership through Guitar Center, and it's the Lasalle Gabriel Music Foundation. And we're going to be supplying instruments for at-risk children, um, you know, Mexicans, Asians, African Americans, and just giving them these grants where they can have access to music, have access to music lessons. And I mean, we have to do it,
Yes,
because
yes, we do.
the teachers unions and all this politics that goes on, I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
When I
critical
was in the
race
third
theory.
grade,
Yeah, go
right?
ahead.
When I was in the third grade, all you had to do is go to your teacher and say, "I want to play the trumpet."
Right.
And they sent you down to the auditorium. You signed a piece of paper, you took the instrument home.
Right.
Nowadays, they have the music teacher as a substitute English teacher.
Well, I'd go even further. I just believe everybody should try to play some musical instrument at some time in their lives. If you had to pick one, I would agree with you. It should be the piano. But in fact, I don't understand. My thing was I saw other people doing it, and it fascinated me, and I had to try it myself. So, and I tell people around me who don't try music, I don't understand how you can sit around and watch people doing this and don't want to try it yourself, but that's just my personality. So once again, thank you. Let's say I like the idea about the foundation. I'll be following up with you on that. I know some very potential students for what you're doing, and so we'll work on that and see can we get our people reinterested in music, just like I want to
Absolutely.
get them reinterested in baseball. But that's a whole nother subject. Thank you very much, sir. Look to talk to you soon. Maybe sit down and have a bite to eat with you and talk about some of the other great things you're doing and how we can use that to leverage some positive things for our children in these challenged environments. So once again, everyone, Lasalle Gabriel, I call him the music man, and achieved a lot of great things. Go out and look him up on the internet and keep an eye out for some of the new music that he's going to be producing for us. So Lasalle, once again, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you soon and doing some things in the community with you. So good night, and
Fantastic. Good
say
night.
hi to
Thank
the
you.
wife and the family for me, and
I
beautiful
will. Thank
kids
you
that
very
I
much.
met Saturday. Okay. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you very much, LaSalle. All right. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. Probably went on a little long there, but he's done so many great things that I have a hard time weeding it out. It's a favorite subject of mine. So thanks very much for watching this edition of Bright Lights by Lacy Johnson. Once again, remember to go out to lacyjohnson.com and support the podcast and what we're doing here. And subscribe, click the bell for notification, and give us some feedback on how we're doing. We know we always have room for improvement. We always be striving to do that and never take you, our audience, for granted. So good night. Have a great evening and look forward to seeing you next week, talking to you next week. Thanks a lot.